In the world of Fallout 4, time doesn't just pass, it fractures. It splits into before and after, into memories and ruins, into the quiet hum of a normal morning and the sudden scream of sirens that never truly stops echoing. And to understand the entire Fallout 4 timeline, it helps to begin not in the wasteland, but in the last peaceful seconds of the old world when everything still looked clean, when the streets still had lawns and mailboxes, when people still believed the future was something you could plan for. The story begins on the morning of October 23rd, 2077, in the suburban neighborhood of Sanctuary Hills. The air feels calm and ordinary, almost too ordinary. There are neat houses lined up like perfect little promises, and the world has the bright, polished look of a society that desperately wants to believe it's stable. Inside one of those homes lives the person who will later be known as the sole survivor. Their life is simple in the way only a pre-war life can be simple. A spouse, a baby, a routine, a home full of small details that feel meaningless at the time until the moment they become priceless because they're about to vanish forever. In these first moments, Fallout 4 quietly reminds you that the end of the world doesn't feel like the end of the world while it's happening. It feels like any other day. The television hums with news. The neighborhood looks peaceful. People talk about their plans. The future is still a concept that makes sense. Even though the world beyond the neighborhood has been tense for years, wars, shortages, growing instability, most ordinary people have learned to live with that tension the same way people live with distant thunder. It's there, but it's not here. Not yet. And then the sirens begin. The news anchor's voice shifts from calm reporting to urgent warning. The broadcast cuts through the room like a blade. Nuclear detonations confirmed. The words feel unreal, like something you'd hear in a movie. But outside, the neighborhood changes instantly. People rush into the streets. Some scream, some freeze, some run. The world goes from calm to chaos in seconds. And in that moment, the old world's greatest lie is exposed. The idea that everything is under control. Vault-Tec representatives appear, not as saviors, but as the final gatekeepers of survival. The sole survivor and their family are rushed toward Vault 111, a nearby vault built into the hillside. The path to the vault is filled with panic. People who weren't chosen beg, shout, and plead. Soldiers hold them back, and that image ordinary civilians separated from safety by armed force becomes one of the most haunting symbols of Fallout's world. Because the end of civilization isn't just fire, it's the moment society decides who gets to live. The family reaches the vault platform just in time. The great metal elevator lowers them into the earth, and above them, the sky begins to glow with an unnatural light. A nuclear blast blooms in the distance, bright enough to wash the world in white. It's not just destruction, it's the moment history is erased. The vault door seals, the outside world becomes a memory. Inside Vault 111, the residents are guided into a clean, sterile facility. The lighting is bright, the floors are spotless, the walls are smooth and modern in a way that feels almost comforting, like a hospital. The vault staff speaks calmly, reassuring everyone that they will be safe, that everything is part of the plan, that they just need to step into the pods for a decontamination procedure. The sole survivor and their spouse follow instructions, holding their baby close. It's the kind of moment where you don't think you have a choice. You're moving forward because stopping would mean admitting the truth, that you're completely powerless. They step into the cryogenic pods. The glass closes. A cold mist fills the chamber. The world blurs, and then nothing. For the sole survivor, time becomes a silent ocean. They don't experience the years. They don't dream. They don't age, they simply vanish from the flow of history. But above them, the world continues without them. The bombs have fallen, the surface has burned, the air has become radioactive, the cities have collapsed, and the wasteland begins its long transformation into something new. Vault 111, however, is not a normal vault. Like many vaults, it has a purpose beyond shelter. Vault 111's experiment is cryogenic freezing. The residents are not meant to live normal lives underground. They are meant to be stored, preserved, and observed. Human beings turned into data, into specimens, into resources waiting to be used. Vault-Tec promised safety, but Vault-Tec always had another agenda. At some point, during the centuries that pass, something goes wrong. The Vault staff dies. Systems fail. The facility becomes abandoned, left to run on automatic processes. The residents remain frozen, trapped in a stillness that feels almost merciful compared to what the surface becomes. But mercy is not what waits for them. The sole survivor awakens briefly, not because the vault is opening, but because someone has come inside. The cryopod's systems begin to thaw. Vision returns slowly. The glass is fogged, but the world beyond it becomes visible in fragments. The sole survivor sees movement, figures in the chamber, armed strangers, the voice of their spouse, confused and frightened, and then the nightmare unfolds in slow motion. The pod next to them opens. Their spouse is forced awake. Their baby Sean is taken from their arms. The sole survivor can't move. They can't stop it. They can only watch through the glass as their spouse pleads, screams, fights, and then, with cold finality, the stranger shoots them. The sound is muffled through the pod, but the violence is unmistakable. The spouse collapses, the baby is carried away, and the sole survivor is forced back into frozen darkness, helpless, trapped inside the worst kind of prison, one where you can see what's happening, but you cannot change it. When they awaken again, it is truly. The pod opens. The cold air spills out. The room is dim, damaged, and quiet. The sole survivor steps out into Vault 111, and immediately the world feels wrong. The lights flicker. The hallways are empty. The place that was once clean and controlled now feels like a tomb. There are no staff members, no other residents alive, only dead bodies, broken equipment, and the distant sound of dripping water. The vault has become a mausoleum for an experiment that ended long ago. As they move through the vault, the sole survivor discovers what happened. The residents did not survive. The experiment failed. The vault staff abandoned their posts or died. And the only reason the sole survivor is alive is because their pod functioned properly, or because it was intentionally preserved. Either way, the message is clear. They are alone. They reach the vault door. It opens slowly, grinding against rust and time. And for the first time in over 200 years, the sole survivor steps into sunlight. The world outside is unrecognizable. Sanctuary Hills is still there, but it is not the neighborhood they remember. The houses are broken. The streets are cracked. The trees are dead or twisted. The air feels dry and harsh. Everything looks like it has been drained of color and life. The world has become a skeleton of itself, and the silence is one of the most unsettling parts. There are no cars, no voices, no normal sounds of civilization, just wind, distant creaking, and the feeling that the world is holding its breath. The sole survivor walks to their old home, driven by instinct, by denial, by the desperate hope that something familiar might still exist. Inside, the rooms are empty, ruined, filled with debris. The crib is there. The small details remain like cruel jokes. The past is preserved only in fragments, And in the middle of that broken home, one thing still functions: Codsworth. Codsworth, the family's Mr. Handy robot, has remained in Sanctuary for over 2 centuries, waiting, cleaning, polishing, maintaining routines long after they stopped mattering. When he sees the sole survivor, he reacts with shock and joy as if no time has passed at all. His voice is familiar. His mannerisms are comforting. But there's something heartbreaking about him too, because he represents the old world's stubborn refusal to accept reality. He kept waiting because he was built to wait. Codsworth explains what happened as best as he can. The bombs fell. The family never came back. Raiders and strange creatures appeared over the years. The neighborhood fell into ruin, and the sole survivor has been missing for 210 years. That number hangs in the air like a weight. It's too big to understand. It means everyone they knew is dead. Every friend, every neighbor, every piece of their life. Gone, the only thing left is their child, somewhere out there in the wasteland, Sean. And so the sole survivor's purpose becomes clear. It isn't just survival. It's not just adapting. It's finding their stolen child. It's chasing the last living thread, connecting them to the life they lost. Before they can leave, the sole survivor begins encountering the new world's dangers. Giant mutated insects crawl through the ruins. The air carries a faint radioactive edge. The landscape feels like a battlefield abandoned long ago. And as they search the nearby area, they come across a place that acts like a doorway into the Commonwealth's deeper story: Concord. Concord is one of the first true glimpses of the post-war world's violence. Raiders occupy the town, armed and aggressive, hunting for loot and control. Gunfire echoes through the streets. The sole survivor, still adjusting to the reality of combat, is pulled into a fight they didn't choose. And inside the town, they find a group of survivors pinned down inside a museum. This group includes Preston Garvey, one of the last remaining Minutemen. The Minutemen were once a militia devoted to protecting settlements, helping ordinary people survive the wasteland. They were inspired by the old Revolutionary War spirit, the idea of citizens defending their communities. But by the time the sole survivor meets Preston, the Minutemen are broken, betrayed, reduced to a handful of survivors clinging to hope. They are running, not fighting, and they are desperate. The sole survivor helps them escape, and in the process, they step into power armor for the first time. It's an old world relic, heavy and powerful, a symbol of what America once was. They wield it not as a soldier of the old world, but as a survivor of the new. And when they face the first Deathclaw, one of the wasteland's most terrifying creatures, the reality of the Commonwealth becomes undeniable. This world is not just ruined, it is alive, and it is hungry. After the fight, Preston and the survivors travel back to Sanctuary, and the sole survivor is given a choice: keep moving alone, chasing Sean, or begin rebuilding something alongside others. This is one of the earliest crossroads in Fallout 4's timeline, because the sole survivor isn't just a person searching for family anymore. They are becoming a leader, whether they want to or not. The Commonwealth is a place where power doesn't come from titles. It comes from action, from who survives, from who others choose to follow. And as the sole survivor begins to explore further, the Commonwealth opens up like a map of broken history, settlements scattered like islands, raiders like storms, mutants like nightmares, and somewhere, hidden beneath everything, a whisper that people speak with fear and uncertainty: the Institute. A shadow organization said to live underground, said to steal people in the night, said to replace them with synths, machines that look human, people who aren't people, neighbors who suddenly aren't the same. friends who vanish, leaders who change. In the Commonwealth, the Institute is not just a faction, it is a ghost story that everyone believes because everyone has a reason to. And with that whisper, the sole survivor's personal mission becomes entangled with something much bigger. Because Sean's kidnapping is not just a random tragedy, it's part of a larger conflict, a war over the future, a war over identity, a war over what humanity becomes when the old world is gone and the new world is built from fear. For now, though, the sole survivor is still at the beginning of their journey, still stepping out of the past and into the present, still learning how to breathe in a world that no longer remembers them. And as the sun sets over the ruins of Sanctuary Hills, the Commonwealth stretches out ahead, dangerous, silent, and waiting. The Commonwealth doesn't reveal itself all at once. It unfolds slowly, like fog lifting off broken streets, showing you just enough to keep you moving forward, and just enough to remind you how dangerous curiosity can be. After the sole survivor steps out of Vault 111 and survives those first violent moments in Concord, the world begins to widen. Sanctuary becomes a small pocket of safety, or at least something that feels like safety compared to the ruins beyond it. The survivors that Preston Garvey leads, tired, frightened, and carrying what little hope they have left, begin talking about rebuilding. They speak like people who have been running for so long that the idea of standing still feels almost impossible. But even as they talk about farms and defenses and walls, the sole survivor's mind keeps circling back to one thing: Sean, the child stolen from their arms, the only thread connecting them to the life they lost. And so the search begins, not as a grand heroic quest, but as a desperate attempt to find information in a world where information is rare. The sole survivor learns quickly that in the wasteland, knowledge is more valuable than bullets. You can fight raiders, you can outrun monsters, but you can't shoot uncertainty. You can't punch answers out of the air. You have to listen, you have to ask questions, you have to follow rumors like footprints in dust. The first major truth the sole survivor discovers is that the Commonwealth has something resembling a city, not a nation, not a republic, but a real settlement, large enough to have markets, security, politics, and a kind of daily life that almost feels normal. People call it Diamond City, and in the broken geography of Boston, it becomes a beacon, a place where traders gather, where people go when they need supplies, or news, or protection. A place where civilization hasn't fully returned, but it's trying. The journey toward Diamond City is the first long walk into the true Commonwealth. It's a path through ruined neighborhoods and cracked highways, through collapsed buildings and scattered skeletons that have been lying where they fell for 2 centuries. The sole survivor sees signs of the old world everywhere: rusted cars, faded advertisements, abandoned houses with furniture still inside. The world feels like a museum that nobody asked for, filled with exhibits that were once someone's life. And in between those ruins, life moves in new forms. Mutated animals stalk the shadows. Raiders claim territory with crude graffiti and cruelty. Super mutants roam the streets like walking war machines, shouting in broken voices and carrying weapons scavenged from the dead. The sole survivor begins to understand that the Commonwealth isn't just dangerous because of radiation or monsters. It's dangerous because it has become a place where violence is normal, where the idea of safety is temporary, where you can't let your guard down for long because the world will punish you for it. Along the way, the sole survivor begins hearing more about the Institute. The rumors grow heavier the closer they get to larger settlements. People talk about disappearances, about kidnappings, about loved ones vanishing in the night, Some say the Institute takes people underground for experiments. Others say it replaces them with synths, artificial humans that look real, act real, and can live among people without anyone noticing. In the Commonwealth, this fear isn't just paranoia, it's a survival instinct, because if you can't trust the person next to you, you can't build anything lasting. Communities collapse when suspicion becomes stronger than cooperation. This fear has shaped Diamond City itself. The city is built inside the remains of Fenway Park, the old baseball stadium turned into a fortress of scrap metal walls and guarded gates. It's a strange sight, this symbol of old-world entertainment transformed into a stronghold. And when the sole survivor arrives, they find a place that is busy, noisy, alive. People argue in the streets. Vendors shout about their goods. Guards patrol the entrances. There's music. There's conversation. There's a kind of life here that feels almost shocking after the silence of the ruins. But Diamond City is not a perfect refuge. It has its own tensions, its own rules, its own ugliness. It is a city built on survival, and survival often demands compromises. The sole survivor quickly notices that there are people who live comfortably here and people who don't. There are neighborhoods that feel safer and corners where desperation collects like dust. There are guards who act like protectors and guards who act like they're barely holding back their own frustration. One of the first things the sole survivor learns is that Diamond City has a mayor, and the mayor is not universally loved. He speaks of security and stability, but many residents feel like he is more interested in maintaining control than in truly helping people. And this is where the Commonwealth's deeper story begins to show itself. Even in a place trying to rebuild, politics returns, power returns, people begin fighting over leadership again. It's one of Fallout's most consistent themes. You can destroy the old world, but you can't destroy human nature. It always grows back. The sole survivor's search for Sean leads them to one of Diamond City's most important sources of information, a detective named Nick Valentine. Nick is not an ordinary person. He is a synth, a machine built in the shape of a man, with a mind that feels both human and haunted. He speaks with a calm, weary voice, like someone who has seen too much and accepted that the world will never be kind. He wears an old trench coat, carries himself like a noir detective out of a pre-war film, and lives in a small office filled with case files and quiet determination. Nick Valentine is one of the Commonwealth's strangest contradictions. He is living proof that synths exist, living proof that the Institute's technology is real, but he is also someone who helps people, someone who uses his skills to solve problems, to find missing persons, to bring answers into a world that is drowning in uncertainty. In a place where synths are feared, Nick stands openly in the light, enduring suspicion because he refuses to hide. When the sole survivor meets Nick, they find him trapped in a vault beneath the city. A group of criminals has captured him, likely hoping to use his skills or silence him. The sole survivor fights through this danger and frees him, and in doing so, begins forming one of the most important alliances in the Fallout 4 timeline. Because Nick Valentine becomes more than a companion, he becomes a guide into the mystery of the Institute. Nick listens to the sole survivor's story about Vault 111, about the kidnapping, about Sean, and unlike most people, he doesn't dismiss it as impossible. He doesn't laugh. He doesn't tell them they're chasing a ghost. He takes it seriously because he understands that the Institute is capable of things that seem impossible. He has seen too much to doubt the strange. Together, they begin investigating leads. The Commonwealth is full of rumors, but Nick knows how to separate rumor from pattern. He tracks the trail of a man named Kellogg, a mercenary tied to the kidnapping. Kellogg is not just a criminal, he is a symbol of the wasteland's cruelty, a man who has survived by being harder than everyone else, a man who has done terrible things and lived long enough to stop caring. The sole survivor's pursuit of Kellogg leads them through more of the Commonwealth's danger. They learn that Kellogg is connected to the Institute, that he has access to resources and technology far beyond what most surface dwellers can imagine. He is not just a raider, he is a tool of something larger. And this is when the sole survivor begins realizing that Sean's kidnapping wasn't random. It was deliberate, it was planned, it was executed by professionals. Eventually, the trail leads to Fort Hagen, an old military base turned into a stronghold. The fort is filled with traps, defenses, and hostile forces. It feels like a place designed to keep people out or to keep something in. And when the sole survivor finally confronts Kellogg, the encounter is tense and heavy. Kellogg is calm, almost amused. He speaks like a man who has accepted the world's cruelty as natural law. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't beg. He doesn't fear judgment. He believes survival justifies everything. In the confrontation, Kellogg reveals a truth that shifts the entire timeline of Fallout 4 inches, a way that feels like a punch to the chest. Sean is not where the sole survivor thinks he is. Time has passed differently than they understand. The kidnapping happened long ago, but not just long ago in the way the sole survivor experienced it. It happened decades ago. Sean is not a baby anymore. This is one of the most painful realizations in the Fallout 4 story, because it means the sole survivor's hope finding their child still young, still needing them, has been built on a misunderstanding of time. They have been chasing a memory, and now they are forced to accept that Sean has grown up somewhere in the wasteland. Without them, the thought is unbearable. It's like grieving someone while knowing they might still be alive. The sole survivor kills Kellogg, ending the life of the man who stole everything from them. But the victory feels hollow, because the real enemy isn't Kellogg. Kellogg was only the hand. The Institute is the mind behind it, and the Institute is still out there, hidden, untouchable, like a shadow that can't be shot. After Kellogg's death, the sole survivor discovers something even stranger. Kellogg had implants, pieces of advanced technology inside his body, keeping him alive longer than a normal human lifespan, enhancing him, preserving him. This detail matters because it shows the Institute's reach. It shows how far their science goes. It shows that they can reshape a human body the same way they can build a synth. It also hints at something deeper, something that makes the Institute feel less like a rumor and more like an unstoppable force. Nick Valentine suggests an unusual next step. If they can't reach the Institute directly, maybe they can use what Kellogg left behind. His brain implants contain memories, and those memories might hold the information they need. This leads the sole survivor to one of the Commonwealth's most unsettling locations, the Memory Den. The Memory Den is a place where people pay to relive memories, not just remember them, but experience them again, fully, as if time rewinds and the past becomes real. It's a form of escape in a world where the present is harsh. People come here to feel something they lost, a loved one, a happier time, a moment before everything went wrong. But for the sole survivor, the Memory Den becomes something else. It becomes a doorway into Kellogg's mind. Through a strange and unsettling process, the sole survivor enters Kellogg's memories, walking through fragments of his life like rooms in a broken house. They see his childhood, his violence, his survival, his connection to the Institute. They see moments that explain how he became what he was, and finally, they see the kidnapping itself from the other side. They see Sean taken. They see the cold efficiency of the operation, and most importantly, they see glimpses of the Institute's technology, its methods, its presence. When the sole survivor leaves the memory den, they carry the weight of those memories like something heavy in their chest. They have answers now, but those answers are painful. Sean is older, the Institute is real, and the path forward is no longer about searching neighborhoods and asking strangers. It's about breaking into the deepest secret of the Commonwealth. But how do you reach a place that doesn't exist on any map? The Institute is underground, hidden, protected by technology so advanced it might as well be magic to surface survivors. People don't walk into it. People don't find it by accident. And this is where Fallout 4's timeline shifts from a personal search into a larger story of factions and power. Because to reach the Institute, the sole survivor will need help. They will need allies. They will need a way to build something impossible. And as the Commonwealth's wind moves through the ruins of Boston, the sole survivor stands at the edge of a new chapter, one where the search for a child becomes a war for the future. The Commonwealth has a way of making every answer feel like the beginning of a bigger question. The sole survivor now knows that the Institute is real, that Sean is not the baby they lost, and that Kellogg was only one piece of a much larger machine. And yet, even with that knowledge, the path forward still feels impossible, because the Institute isn't a place you can walk to. It doesn't have a road leading to it, or a gate you can knock on, or a skyline you can see from far away. It is hidden beneath the Commonwealth, like a secret buried in stone, and the people who live on the surface speak its name the way you speak about storms, something powerful, something distant, something that can strike without warning. So the sole survivor does what every wasteland traveler eventually learns to do. They follow the only thing that can guide them through the ruins: whispers, patterns, and the fragile thread of human connections. The memory den has given them their first real clue, but it also made something else clear. The Institute uses technology far beyond anything most surface dwellers understand. If the sole survivor wants to reach it, they'll need help from someone who understands that world of hidden machines. This is where the railroad enters the timeline. In the Commonwealth, the railroad is spoken of like a myth. Some people believe it's real. Others believe it's a story told to give synths hope. And some believe it's a dangerous group of radicals who care more about machines than humans. But regardless of what anyone believes, the railroad exists, quiet, secretive, and determined. They operate in the shadows, not because they love secrecy, but because secrecy is the only way to survive when powerful enemies want you erased. The railroad's entire mission is built around one belief: that synths are people, not tools, not property, not disposable machines, people. And because of that belief, they dedicate themselves to rescuing synths from the Institute, smuggling them out, and giving them new lives on the surface. In a world where most people fear synths, the railroad chooses compassion over fear. But compassion in the Commonwealth is dangerous. It makes you a target. To find the railroad, the sole survivor follows a trail known as the Freedom Trail. It's a path marked by old world symbols and clues, leading through the ruins of Boston like a scavenger hunt left behind by history itself. The trail ends at the Old North Church, a crumbling landmark filled with dust and silence, and beneath it, hidden behind a secret door, the sole survivor finds the railroad's headquarters. Inside, the railroad is not glamorous. It isn't a shining resistance base filled with armies. It's a handful of people living underground, surrounded by maps, code words, and the constant pressure of being hunted. Their leader, Desdemona, watches the sole survivor with suspicion at first. In the wasteland, trust is not given freely. It is earned, and the railroad has survived this long because it assumes everyone could be an enemy until proven otherwise. The sole survivor explains their mission: Sean, the Institute, the need to get inside, and this is where the railroad becomes essential, because they have something the sole survivor doesn't: knowledge of the Institute's technology and the experience of fighting it. They know about teleportation. They know about molecular relays. They know the Institute doesn't simply hide underground behind walls. It hides behind distance itself, using technology to move people in and out without leaving tracks. The railroad tells the sole survivor something that changes everything. The Institute can be reached, but only through its relay system. It doesn't open doors. It doesn't build tunnels to the surface. It teleports, and if the sole survivor wants to reach it, they'll need to build a device capable of hijacking that relay signal, a teleporter of their own. In another world, that idea would be absurd. In the Commonwealth, it's just the next impossible thing you have to do to survive. The railroad points the sole survivor toward a key component: a Courser chip. Coursers are the Institute's hunters, elite synths designed for one purpose: tracking down escaped synths and bringing them back. Coursers are feared even among people who don't fully understand synths, because they move with unnatural precision and they kill without hesitation. They are the Institute's claws reaching up from underground. To get a Courser chip, the sole survivor must hunt down a Courser and kill it. This leads them to Greenatech Genetics, a ruined facility filled with danger. Inside are gunners, mercenaries who fight for caps and power. The building is a maze of gunfire and broken laboratories, and the deeper the sole survivor goes, the more the world feels like it's turning into something cold and clinical again, like Vault 111, like the Institute's shadow. At the top of the facility, the sole survivor finds the Courser. It isn't just strong, it's disciplined, efficient. It fights like a machine built to win. And when the sole survivor finally defeats it, they take the chip, holding in their hands a piece of the Institute's most advanced technology. It's small, but it feels heavy because it represents a truth the Commonwealth has been whispering all along. The Institute is not a myth, it is a system, and systems leave parts behind. With the Courser chip secured, the sole survivor returns to the railroad. Their resident tech expert, a man named Tinker Tom, examines it with excitement and paranoia mixed together, like someone staring at a piece of forbidden magic. He decodes it, extracting the information needed to build a relay interceptor. And this is where Fallout 4's timeline begins shifting into its next phase, because the sole survivor now has the key, but they still need the door. Building the relay interceptor requires advanced engineering. It requires power, it requires materials, and most importantly, it requires someone capable of assembling it. The sole survivor has options here, and this is one of the major branching points of Fallout 4's story, because different factions can help build the teleporter, and whichever faction helps becomes tied to the sole survivor's path. One possible ally is the Minutemen, through Preston Garvey, representing the Commonwealth's grassroots hope. Another is the Brotherhood of Steel, representing militarized order and technological control. Another is the Railroad, representing secret resistance and synth liberation. Each faction sees the Institute differently, and each faction wants something different from the future. But regardless of who helps, the teleporter is built. It rises out of scrap metal and wires like a monument to human stubbornness. It's one of the most surreal moments in the Fallout 4 timeline, because it shows how the wasteland can create miracles out of ruins. The sole survivor stands on a platform surrounded by machinery that shouldn't exist in a world like this, a world of rust and dirt and broken highways. And yet, here it is. a bridge to the deepest secret of the Commonwealth. The relay activates, light bends, sound warps, the air feels like it's folding, and then the sole survivor is gone. In an instant, they are no longer on the surface. They are inside the Institute. The first impression of the Institute is not horror, not immediately. It's cleanliness, bright lights, smooth white walls, quiet hallways, a hum of machinery that feels controlled and endless. It's like stepping into a different world entirely, one untouched by the apocalypse. The Institute looks like what the old world promised: the future would be sterile, advanced, perfected. And the contrast is so sharp it feels unreal. The sole survivor has spent their journey walking through ruins and blood and broken buildings, and now they are standing in a place that feels like it never ended. But that cleanliness hides something colder. The Institute is not peaceful. It is controlled, and control is not the same as safety. Synths move through the halls like workers, like servants. Scientists speak calmly, focusing on research as if the surface world is nothing but background noise. The sole survivor is treated like an anomaly, a curiosity, a visitor from a world they barely acknowledge. Some are fascinated. Some are dismissive. And beneath their polite words is a quiet arrogance, the belief that the Institute is above the surface, above the chaos, above the consequences of the apocalypse. The sole survivor is guided deeper, past laboratories and observation rooms, until they reach the heart of the Institute. And there, the timeline delivers its most emotionally heavy reveal. Sean, not as a baby, not as a child, as an old man, he stands with calm authority, dressed not like a survivor, but like a leader of a civilization. He speaks to the sole survivor as if he has been waiting for them, as if this meeting was inevitable. And in a way, it was, because Sean is not just a victim of the Institute. Sean is the Institute. He is father, the director of the organization, the man who rules the underground world, the one whose decisions shape the Commonwealth from beneath the earth. The sole survivor's mind is forced to catch up to reality. The child they lost is now older than them, aged by decades they never lived. The pain of that truth is almost impossible to describe. It's not just loss, it's theft. Time has been stolen, a life has been stolen, and now the sole survivor is standing face to face with the future they were denied. Sean explains the truth. The Institute needed unmutated human DNA, someone untouched by generations of radiation exposure. The sole survivor, frozen in Vault 111, was a perfect resource. Sean was taken because he was genetically pure. The sole survivor was kept alive because they were useful, and because Sean, deep down, wanted them preserved. He speaks with a strange mixture of affection and distance, like someone who remembers love, but has been shaped by an environment where love is not the highest priority. Sean also reveals something even more unsettling. The Institute has been creating synths not simply as machines, but as a new form of life. They see themselves as building the future of humanity. They believe the surface world is doomed, chaotic, beyond saving, and they believe the only way forward is through the Institute's controlled progress. To them, the Commonwealth is not home, it is a laboratory. The sole survivor is given a choice here, even if it doesn't feel like one. They can reject Sean's world, fight against the Institute, and remain loyal to the surface. Or they can step into the Institute's vision, becoming part of the very organization that caused their suffering. Fallout 4 doesn't make this decision easy, because Sean is not a cartoon villain. He is a son, a lost child, a stranger, a leader, a product of his environment. He is the living proof that the sole survivor's past is gone, and that the future is something unfamiliar. Before the sole survivor can act, Sean releases them back to the surface, not as a prisoner escaping, but as someone being tested. He wants to see what they do. He wants to see which world they choose. In a way, it's one final experiment, not in a vault, not in a lab, but in the open Commonwealth itself. The sole survivor returns to the surface, and the air feels different now. The Commonwealth hasn't changed, but the sole survivor has. They know the Institute is real. They've seen it. They've spoken to Sean, and now the story is no longer about finding him. It's about deciding what to do with the truth, because the Commonwealth is full of factions, and each one will demand something from the sole survivor. The Railroad will ask them to use their access to save synths. The Brotherhood will ask them to destroy the Institute before it becomes unstoppable. The Minutemen will ask them to protect settlements and build a safer world from the ground up. And the Institute itself will ask them to accept its vision, to become its future. The sole survivor stands in the ruins of Boston, looking at a skyline of broken towers, and somewhere beneath those streets, Sean waits in a world of white walls and cold lights. The future is no longer hidden. It is calling. When the sole survivor returns from the Institute, the Commonwealth feels the same on the surface, but the meaning of everything has changed. The cracked streets are still cracked. The ruined buildings still lean in the wind. Raiders still stalk the highways, and super mutants still howl from the shadows. But now the sole survivor carries knowledge that most people only whisper about in fear. They have seen the Institute with their own eyes. They have walked through its bright corridors. They have spoken to Sean, now an old man, now the leader of the very organization that haunts the Commonwealth like a ghost. And once you know something like that is real, it becomes impossible to pretend the world is simple again, because the Commonwealth is not just a land of survival anymore. It's a land of competing futures. Different visions of what humanity should become, and different factions willing to fight, lie, and destroy to make their vision the one that survives. And that is why the next major turning point arrives not quietly, but dramatically. In the sky, the Brotherhood of Steel comes to the Commonwealth like a thunderstorm. One day, as the sole survivor moves through the ruins, a deep mechanical roar fills the air. It's the sound of engines, massive and heavy, echoing over the broken skyline. People look up. Birds scatter. The clouds seem to tremble. And then it appears an enormous airship drifting above Boston, a metal fortress floating like a war god. The Prydwen, the Brotherhood's mobile command base, a symbol of power and certainty in a world that has neither. The arrival of the Prydwen changes everything. Even people who don't know the Brotherhood's history can feel what it means. This isn't a small group of survivors. This isn't a settlement militia. This is an army, organized, disciplined, and armed with technology that most Commonwealth settlers can barely imagine. Vertibirds circle like metal insects. Power-armored soldiers patrol with heavy weapons. The Brotherhood doesn't arrive to negotiate. It arrives to claim the future. The Brotherhood of Steel has always been shaped by one central belief: that advanced technology is dangerous in the wrong hands. The old world destroyed itself because it built weapons too powerful, trusted corporations too much, and treated scientific progress like a toy instead of a responsibility. The Brotherhood sees itself as the answer to that mistake. A guardian force that collects technology, controls it, and prevents humanity from repeating the same catastrophe. But the Brotherhood is not a charity. It does not exist to make the wasteland comfortable. It exists to enforce its own definition of safety. And in Fallout 4, under Elder Arthur Maxon, the Brotherhood is more aggressive than ever. Maxon believes the Commonwealth is threatened by abominations, super mutants, feral ghouls, and most importantly, synths. To him, synths are not people. They are machines that imitate people, and they represent a future where humanity is replaced. The Institute is not simply a rival faction, it is an existential threat, and so the Brotherhood comes to the Commonwealth with one clear objective: destroy the Institute. The sole survivor is quickly pulled into this new reality. If they approach the Brotherhood, they are met by soldiers who speak with military precision, orders, protocol, chain of command. The Brotherhood's structure is comforting in its clarity. In the chaos of the wasteland, the Brotherhood feels like certainty made real. They have rules, they have ranks, they have purpose, and for someone who has lost everything, purpose can feel like the closest thing to peace. The Brotherhood's presence also reveals how fractured the Commonwealth truly is. Settlements like Diamond City may have walls, but they do not have the power to stand against forces like this. Raiders and gunners might control neighborhoods, but they cannot control the skies. The Brotherhood changes the balance of power simply by existing. It is a reminder that in Fallout, strength is often the first language spoken, and everything else is a translation. As the sole survivor becomes more involved, they learn the Brotherhood's methods. They send patrols to clear out super mutant nests. They hunt feral ghouls. They confiscate dangerous technology. They recruit people who prove themselves capable. And they view the Commonwealth not as a land to join, but as a battlefield to cleanse. At the same time, the Railroad watches the Brotherhood's arrival with dread. The Railroad has always been small, fragile, and hidden. It survives through secrecy, safe houses, and coded messages. It cannot fight the Brotherhood head-on, and it knows that the Brotherhood's ideology makes synth freedom impossible. To the Brotherhood, freeing synths isn't a moral cause. It's releasing dangerous machines into society. The Railroad sees synths as oppressed people. The Brotherhood sees synths as threats wearing human faces. And so the Commonwealth's tension tightens like a rope being pulled from both ends. The sole survivor stands in the middle of it all. They have been inside the Institute. They have connections to the Railroad. They may have rebuilt the Minutemen. And now the Brotherhood has arrived, demanding loyalty and action. The sole survivor becomes a walking contradiction, someone who can speak to every faction, someone who can influence the future, someone whose choices will decide which vision survives. This is where Fallout 4's timeline begins shifting into the stage of open conflict, not just random violence, but organized war. And war in the wasteland is different than war in the old world. It isn't fought for flags or pride alone. It's fought for the right to exist. The Brotherhood begins gathering intelligence. They want to locate the Institute. They want to understand its defenses. They want to destroy its ability to produce synths. They also begin targeting technology that could threaten their mission. Any advanced weaponry, any pre-war research, any unknown machine becomes suspect. In the Brotherhood's worldview, the Commonwealth is full of dangerous relics that must be controlled. And this is where the sole survivor begins, seeing the Brotherhood's darker edge. The Brotherhood speaks of protecting humanity, but its definition of humanity is narrow. It views ghouls with disgust, even those who remain sane. It views synths with hatred, even those who have done nothing wrong. It sees mutation as corruption. It sees difference as danger, and in the Commonwealth, difference is everywhere. Meanwhile, the Institute continues operating beneath the surface. It sends synths to the surface for missions. It replaces people. It monitors the Commonwealth like a scientist watching a petri dish. And it remains almost untouchable because it doesn't fight wars the way surface factions do. It doesn't march armies down streets. It teleports. It strikes quietly. It erases evidence. It makes people vanish and leaves everyone else to wonder what happened. The Institute's power is psychological as much as it is physical. It creates paranoia, it creates fear, it makes communities distrust each other, and when people distrust each other, they cannot unite. That is one of the Institute's greatest advantages. A divided surface is an easy surface to control. As the sole survivor navigates these rising tensions, the Commonwealth itself becomes a stage for smaller stories that reflect the larger conflict. Settlements struggle to defend themselves. Raiders take advantage of instability. Gunners sell violence to the highest bidder. Super mutants continue roaming, their existence a reminder of old world experiments that never truly ended. And through it all, the people of the Commonwealth keep trying to live ordinary lives in extraordinary ruins. Diamond City continues functioning, but fear grows. People talk about synth infiltration. Some accuse neighbors, some accuse leaders. There are moments where hysteria threatens to overwhelm reason. The idea that someone could be replaced becomes a poison in the mind. It makes every disagreement feel suspicious. Every change in behavior becomes a possible sign. And this paranoia is one of the most tragic consequences of the Institute's existence, because it damages people even when the Institute isn't present. It turns communities into self-destructing machines. The sole survivor also begins learning more about what synths truly are, not just as Institute tools, but as beings capable of thought and emotion. They meet synths who have escaped, who fear being captured, who struggle with identity. Some synths don't even know they are synths until someone tells them, and that detail is what makes the moral question so heavy. The Railroad argues that synths deserve liberation. The Brotherhood argues that synths must be destroyed. The Institute argues that synths are property, and the Commonwealth's ordinary people mostly just want to survive, caught in the middle of a debate they didn't ask for. The sole survivor's relationship with Sean becomes more complicated as well. Sean, as father, may ask the sole survivor to help the Institute. He may speak of the surface with calm disappointment, as if it is already dead and simply hasn't realized it yet. He may frame the Institute as humanity's best hope, the only place where knowledge is preserved, the only place where progress continues. He may even speak with a kind of sadness, as if he truly believes he is doing what must be done. But the sole survivor can feel the cost. The Institute's progress is built on control, on abduction, on experimentation, on treating the surface as expendable. And the sole survivor's own pain, losing their spouse, losing their child, losing 2 centuries of life, was caused by that same cold logic. So as the Brotherhood strengthens its grip in the Commonwealth, and the Institute continues operating unseen, the sole survivor becomes the pivot point. Every faction sees them as valuable. The Brotherhood sees them as a potential soldier, someone capable of striking at the Institute. The Railroad sees them as an infiltrator, someone who can save synths from inside. The Minutemen see them as a leader, someone who can unify settlements. The Institute sees them as family, someone who might inherit its future. And the more the sole survivor becomes involved, the more the Commonwealth moves toward a breaking point. The Brotherhood begins preparing for war in earnest. They run operations to secure resources. They build alliances through strength. They use their vertibirds to project power across the region. They speak of victory as inevitable, and in their confidence is a dangerous certainty, the belief that destroying the Institute will solve everything, that wiping out synths will protect humanity, that force will cleanse the world. The Railroad, in contrast, becomes more desperate. They know they cannot win through strength alone. They rely on secrecy, sabotage, and careful strikes. They know that if the Brotherhood decides to hunt them, they will be crushed, and so they push harder, faster, risking more. Because in the Railroad's eyes, Time is running out. Every day the Institute exists, synths are born into slavery. Every day the Brotherhood grows stronger. The dream of synth freedom becomes harder to protect. The Minutemen, if the sole survivor supports them, begin rebuilding slowly, settlement by settlement, farm by farm, wall by wall. Their power is not dramatic like the Brotherhood's. It is not secretive like the railroads. It is not advanced like the institutes. It is human, and because of that, it is fragile, but it is also resilient, because it is built from ordinary people choosing to stand together. And as all these forces grow, the Commonwealth begins to feel like it is holding its breath, because sooner or later, the factions will stop preparing, and they will start burning. This is the moment in Fallout 4's timeline where the story shifts from investigation into inevitability. The Institute cannot remain hidden forever. The Brotherhood cannot tolerate its existence. The Railroad cannot stop fighting. The Minutemen cannot keep rebuilding without being drawn into conflict. And the sole survivor cannot remain neutral forever, because neutrality in a war like this is simply another form of surrender. In the distance, the Prydwen floats above Boston like a steel omen, its lights cutting through the night. Beneath the ground, the Institute hums with sterile life, building synths and watching the surface. And between them, the Commonwealth's people live their small lives in the shadow of giants. The sole survivor walks through this world carrying both the past and the future inside them. They are the last living piece of the old world, frozen in time, now forced to choose what the new world becomes. They have lost everything, and yet they have been given something rare in the wasteland, a chance to decide. By the time the Commonwealth reaches this stage of the Fallout 4 timeline, it no longer feels like a region simply struggling to survive. It feels like a powder keg, the kind of place where every conversation carries an edge, where every rumor spreads faster than truth, where every faction is moving pieces across the board in silence. And for the sole survivor, the world has become something even stranger. They are no longer just a person looking for a missing child. They are a person who found their child and discovered that the child has become a leader of a hidden civilization beneath the earth. That truth changes the shape of everything, because once Sean is revealed as father, the director of the Institute, the sole survivor's mission stops being about rescue. It becomes about choice, and choice in Fallout is never clean. It is never painless. It is never simply good or evil. It is about what you're willing to sacrifice and what you refuse to sacrifice, even when the world demands it. The Commonwealth's factions begin to close in around the sole survivor like planets caught in the same gravity. The Brotherhood wants the Institute destroyed. The Railroad wants synths freed. The Minutemen want the surface protected and rebuilt. The Institute wants its future secured, and each faction believes its vision is the only one that can survive. In the early phase of this escalation, much of the conflict happens through missions that feel like individual jobs, but each one is really a thread being pulled tighter. The sole survivor might be asked to retrieve technology from a ruined facility, to clear out a threat near a settlement, to sabotage an enemy's operation, to rescue someone who has been taken. These tasks feel small compared to the scale of the Commonwealth, but they build momentum. They establish trust. They create alliances. And in the wasteland, alliances are the foundation of war. If the sole survivor works with the Brotherhood of Steel, they become more deeply involved in the Brotherhood's military campaign. The Brotherhood's operations are direct, confident, and relentless. They hunt super mutants. They clear out feral ghouls. They seize pre-war technology. They patrol the skies in vertibirds, like they own the air itself. And the more the sole survivor proves themselves, the more the Brotherhood begins to treat them as a weapon, an asset that can be aimed at the Institute. The Brotherhood's ideology becomes clearer, the longer the sole survivor stays close to it. To them, the Institute is not just dangerous, it is unnatural. It is an offense against humanity, and synths are the proof of that offense. The Brotherhood's hatred for synths is not simply fear, it is certainty, the belief that a machine wearing a human face is a lie so dangerous it must be erased before it spreads. This certainty is comforting to some people in the Commonwealth because fear makes people crave simple answers. But it is also terrifying because certainty is often the first step toward cruelty. The Brotherhood doesn't ask whether a synth is kind or harmless. It doesn't ask whether a synth wants to live. It sees synths as a threat by definition, and in that worldview, there is no room for mercy. If the sole survivor works with the Railroad, the conflict takes on a different tone. The Railroad operates in shadows, always hunted, always careful. Their missions are about infiltration, extraction, and survival. They ask the sole survivor to help free synths, to disrupt Institute operations, to protect safe houses. The Railroad's work feels like a quiet war inside a larger war. It isn't about grand battles. It's about people slipping through cracks, about freedom gained one life at a time. And the sole survivor begins seeing synths not as monsters, but as individuals. They meet synths who are terrified of being captured, synths who don't understand why they are hated, synths who simply want to live quietly, to work, to love, to exist without being hunted. The Railroad's worldview is built on empathy, but empathy is dangerous in the Commonwealth. Empathy makes you vulnerable. It makes you hesitate, and hesitation can get you killed. If the sole survivor supports the Minutemen, the timeline feels grounded in the surface world's daily struggle. The Minutemen focus on settlements, helping people defend themselves, building supply lines, creating stability. The Minutemen aren't obsessed with ideology, they're obsessed with survival. They believe the Commonwealth can be rebuilt through cooperation, through community, through ordinary people choosing to stand together instead of tearing each other apart. But even the Minutemen cannot escape the shadow of the Institute forever, because the Institute's influence is everywhere. It steals people, it replaces them, it spreads paranoia. And when paranoia spreads, even peaceful settlements become dangerous. People begin accusing each other, communities fracture, trust collapses, and rebuilding becomes harder. Meanwhile, the Institute continues moving forward beneath the earth. Sean may ask the sole survivor to help with Institute operations, to retrieve technology, to deal with surface threats, to eliminate obstacles. The Institute's missions often feel clinical, like tasks in a lab. They speak of the surface as a problem to be managed. They see raiders, super mutants, and instability as symptoms of a world that cannot be saved. They see synth production as progress. They see their underground society as the only true continuation of humanity's future. And this is where the Institute's greatest contradiction becomes clear. They believe they are saving humanity while treating humans as disposable. They believe they are building a better world while destroying lives on the surface. They believe they are the future while hiding from the consequences of their own actions. The sole survivor is forced to navigate this contradiction constantly. Sean is their child, but Sean is also father, the leader of an organization responsible for kidnapping, experimentation, and fear. Sean may speak of love, but he speaks it like a scientist describing a variable. He may want the sole survivor close, but his world has shaped him into someone who values control over connection. As the sole survivor becomes more involved with these factions, the Commonwealth reaches a series of turning points that push it closer to open war. One of the most important is the growing tension around synth identity. The Commonwealth's paranoia becomes a wildfire. People begin accusing neighbors of being synths. Some are right, Many are wrong. And the damage caused by those accusations doesn't depend on truth. It depends on fear. Fear can ruin lives just as effectively as bullets. There are moments where mobs form, where suspicion becomes violence, where someone is dragged into the street because their behavior seems off. And even if the person is human, the accusation itself can be enough to destroy them. This is one of the Institute's most devastating impacts. It doesn't need to conquer the surface militarily. It can break the surface psychologically. At the same time, the Brotherhood's presence escalates. They aren't just patrolling anymore. They are preparing. They gather intelligence. They strike at enemies. They consolidate power. Their airship dominates the sky, reminding everyone that the Commonwealth now has an occupying force that answers to no one here. The Railroad becomes increasingly desperate because they know that the Brotherhood's ultimate victory would mean synth extermination. To the Railroad, the Brotherhood is not simply a rival. It is a death sentence for every synth they've ever saved. And the Institute watches it all, calmly, patiently, like someone watching animals fight in a cage. The sole survivor's unique position becomes more dangerous with every step. They are one of the few people who can move between factions, who can infiltrate the Institute and return, who can speak to Sean and then walk into Diamond City. That makes them powerful, but it also makes them suspicious. No one fully trusts someone who belongs everywhere, because belonging everywhere can look like loyalty nowhere. As the timeline pushes forward, the sole survivor becomes involved in missions that begin cutting off peaceful solutions. These are the missions where lines are crossed and cannot be uncrossed. If the sole survivor aligns with the Brotherhood, they may be asked to target the Railroad. The Brotherhood sees the Railroad as traitors who protect synths. And in the Brotherhood's eyes, protecting synths is protecting the Institute's influence. This is where the war becomes personal. Because the Railroad is made of people the sole survivor may have fought alongside. People who trusted them. People who believed they were building something just, even if it was fragile. If the sole survivor aligns with the Railroad, they may be asked to sabotage the Brotherhood. The Railroad cannot survive if the Brotherhood dominates the Commonwealth. So the Railroad becomes willing to strike harder, to risk more, and the sole survivor becomes the blade in the dark. If the sole survivor aligns with the Institute, they may be asked to eliminate threats on the surface, to manipulate settlements, to secure the Institute's position. The Institute doesn't see itself as evil. It sees itself as necessary, and necessity is a word that can justify anything. And through all of this, the Minutemen continue trying to hold the surface together, but even they are eventually pulled into the storm. Because war doesn't respect neutrality. If the Institute falls, the Commonwealth changes. If the Brotherhood wins, the Commonwealth changes. If the Railroad succeeds, the Commonwealth changes. And if the Institute survives, the Commonwealth changes in ways the surface may never fully understand. The Commonwealth reaches a moment where the sole survivor can feel the future narrowing. The choices become fewer, the consequences become heavier. The factions stop talking about maybe and start talking about when. When we destroy the Institute, when we free the synths, when we take control, when we rebuild, when we win. And the sole survivor, standing in the middle of this, begins realizing that the Commonwealth's war is not just a war of weapons. It's a war of definitions. What is a person? What is humanity? What is worth saving? The Brotherhood believes humanity must be protected from technology, even if that means destroying beings that look human. The Railroad believes humanity must expand its definition, even if that means fighting powerful enemies. The Institute believes humanity must be controlled and redesigned, even if that means sacrificing the surface. The Minutemen believe humanity must be supported through cooperation, even if that means being weaker than the giants around them. And the sole survivor has to decide which definition becomes real. In the days leading toward the Commonwealth's final conflict, the world feels strangely quiet in moments, not because danger has vanished, but because danger has become routine. The sky still holds the Prydwen like a looming star. The Institute still hums beneath the earth. Settlements still struggle, traders still travel, people still live. But the tension is everywhere, like pressure building in the air before lightning. The sole survivor may walk through Diamond City and hear people talking about synths in hushed voices. They may walk through settlements and see fear behind people's eyes. They may return to the railroad and feel the desperation growing. They may stand on the Prydwen and feel the Brotherhood's confidence hardening into inevitability. They may speak to Sean and feel the distance between parent and child. The distance created not by emotion alone, but by time itself. And in the center of it all, the sole survivor carries a truth that no one else can fully understand. They remember the world before. They remember what humanity was. And now they have to choose what humanity will become. Because in the Commonwealth, the war isn't coming. It's already here. It's just waiting for the moment someone finally pulls the trigger on the future. By the time the Fallout 4 timeline reaches this point, the Commonwealth feels like it has entered a new season of history, one where the air itself seems heavier, where the silence between gunshots feels more deliberate, where every faction has stopped pretending the future can be shared. The war that had been building in the background, quietly tightening like a knot, finally begins to pull itself apart into open conflict. And the sole survivor, once just a parent searching for a stolen child, becomes the deciding force in a struggle that will shape the Commonwealth for generations. This is the stage of the timeline where the Commonwealth reaches its point of no return. Because in Fallout 4, there comes a moment when you can no longer stand with everyone. You can no longer speak to every faction as if you belong to all of them. The lines harden, the missions become irreversible, and the world stops asking what you want and starts demanding what you're willing to destroy. In the days leading up to that moment, the sole survivor moves through a Commonwealth that feels tense in a way that is difficult to explain. Settlements still trade, people still argue in Diamond City, raiders still ambush travelers on broken highways, but the feeling beneath all of it is different now. It feels like everyone knows something is coming, even if they can't name it, like animals sensing a storm before the clouds arrive. The Brotherhood of Steel, high above the ruins, grows bolder. The Prydwen's presence is no longer just intimidating, it's active. Vertibirds patrol more frequently, knights and paladins push deeper into Commonwealth territory. The Brotherhood's speeches become sharper, more absolute. They speak less about threats and more about eradication. Their hatred for the Institute becomes a kind of holy mission, and the sole survivor can feel it. The Brotherhood isn't here to negotiate peace, it's here to win. The railroad, in contrast, becomes more frantic. Their safe houses feel more vulnerable. Their agents feel more exhausted. They know the Brotherhood's rise is not just a political shift, it's an approaching execution. To the Brotherhood, synths are not people who deserve rights. They are a disease. And in a world where the Brotherhood holds power, the railroad's dream of synth freedom becomes an act of rebellion that can only end in blood. The Institute remains calm, but that calm is not peace. It is control. It is the calm of a machine that believes it cannot lose. Beneath the surface, the Institute continues producing synths, continuing research, continuing to view the Commonwealth as something to be managed. And Sean Father continues shaping the Institute's future, even as his health declines and time begins closing in around him. And the Minutemen, if the sole survivor has rebuilt them, stand as the Commonwealth's fragile attempt at unity. They are the closest thing the surface has to a shared defense, a network of people protecting people. But the Minutemen are not designed to fight a war between giants. They are designed to protect farms and settlements from raiders and monsters. And yet, when the future is threatened, even ordinary people are pulled into extraordinary conflict. As the sole survivor continues moving between these forces, the Commonwealth begins presenting them with missions that feel less like errands and more like choices carved into stone. One of the most important pressures comes from the Institute itself. The sole survivor, having entered the Institute and returned, is now someone with access, and access is power. Every faction knows that. The Railroad wants the sole survivor to act as an infiltrator, a spy who can smuggle information and synths out from inside. The Brotherhood wants the sole survivor to help locate the Institute's vulnerabilities so it can be destroyed. The Institute wants the sole survivor to commit fully, to stop pretending they belong to the surface, to accept that the Institute is their family now. And in the middle of all this, the sole survivor faces one of the most painful truths of the Fallout 4 timeline. Sean is dying. Father's illness adds a strange emotional pressure to the war because it means the Institute's future is uncertain. It means leadership will change. It means the Institute may become even more ruthless without Sean's guiding hand. Or it may fracture. Or it may become something new. Sean's death is not just a personal tragedy. It is a political event. And every faction understands that. Sean may offer the sole survivor a role in the Institute's future. He may speak of them as his successor, the one person he trusts to lead the Institute after he's gone. This offer is heavy because it forces the sole survivor to confront what the Institute truly represents. A clean world beneath the earth, a world of science and order, a world that could, in theory, preserve humanity's knowledge forever, but also a world built on abduction, replacement, slavery, and fear. The Institute offers safety, but demands surrender. And then the timeline reaches its breaking point. The sole survivor is eventually forced into actions that will anger one faction beyond repair. In Fallout 4's story, this often comes down to key missions where the factions demand loyalty that cannot be divided. The Brotherhood may demand that the Railroad be eliminated. The Railroad may demand that the Brotherhood be weakened. The Institute may demand that surface resistance be crushed. And once you take that step, the Commonwealth changes instantly, because now the war is no longer theoretical. It becomes real. The Brotherhood's wrath, when triggered, is terrifying. It is not like raiders seeking revenge. It is organized. It is relentless. It is a military machine turning its attention toward a target. If the sole survivor becomes an enemy of the Brotherhood, the skies themselves become dangerous. Vertibirds can appear overhead. Power-armored soldiers can ambush in force. The Brotherhood doesn't simply want to win. It wants to erase threats completely. The Railroad, when pushed into open conflict, becomes desperate in a different way. They are not a faction that can win through brute strength. They win through sabotage, stealth, and timing. If the Railroad is forced into a corner, it will strike hard because it knows it may not get a second chance. It becomes a war of shadows against steel. The Institute, when truly threatened, reveals how dangerous it can be. It has synth armies. It has teleportation. It has surveillance. It can strike without warning. It can appear in the middle of a settlement, wipe out resistance, and vanish again. The Institute does not fight like a normal army. It fights like a system correcting an error. And the sole survivor becomes the spark that sets all of these forces into motion. One of the most significant steps toward the final war is the need to gain access to the Institute's reactor. The Institute's power source is its heart. Without it, the Institute cannot function. Without it, synth production stops. Without it, the Institute's entire underground civilization collapses. Every faction that wants the Institute destroyed focuses on that reactor because it represents both a target and a symbol. Destroy the reactor, and you destroy the Institute's future. But the Institute is not unguarded. It is filled with synth security. It is protected by advanced defenses. And it is hidden behind the relay system, meaning any assault must begin with the same impossible step the sole survivor took earlier: teleportation. This is where the final phase begins. The sole survivor becomes involved in planning, preparing, and executing the assault that will decide the Commonwealth's future. The details depend on which faction they side with, but the shape of the story remains the same. The Commonwealth is about to witness the fall of one of its greatest powers. If the sole survivor sides with the Brotherhood, the plan becomes one of direct military invasion. The Brotherhood will use its strength, its soldiers, its weapons, and its discipline to strike at the Institute. The Brotherhood sees this as a righteous war. It believes it is cleansing the Commonwealth, and it is willing to sacrifice lives to achieve victory because it believes the alternative, allowing the Institute to exist, is worse. If the sole survivor sides with the Railroad, the assault becomes more surgical. The Railroad focuses on infiltration, sabotage, and liberation. Their goal is not just to destroy the Institute, but to save as many synths as possible. To them, the Institute is a prison, and destroying a prison without freeing its prisoners is not victory. It is simply another massacre. If the sole survivor sides with the Minutemen, the assault becomes something different: a surface rebellion. Ordinary settlers, militia fighters, and defenders band together under the sole survivor's leadership. It is the Commonwealth's people standing against the shadow beneath their feet. It is the idea that the surface does not need to be ruled by hidden scientists or militarized outsiders. It can defend itself. It can choose its own future. And if the sole survivor sides with the Institute, the timeline becomes one of suppression. The Institute turns its attention toward eliminating threats above ground. It sees the Brotherhood as an invading force. It sees the Railroad as an infestation. It sees the Minutemen as a nuisance, and it moves to erase them, ensuring that the Institute's vision becomes the only vision left. No matter which path is taken, the Commonwealth becomes a battlefield. In this stage of the timeline, the sole survivor sees the true scale of Fallout 4's conflict. Not just small firefights in ruined towns, but coordinated strikes, explosions, collapsing structures, alarm sirens echoing through underground halls, power armor stomping through corridors, synths firing in perfect formation, the air filled with smoke and energy weapon flashes. It becomes the kind of war the old world once fought, but now fought over the bones of that old world. And through it all, there is a strange tragedy, because every faction believes it is right. The Brotherhood believes it is saving humanity. The Railroad believes it is saving people who have never been allowed to be people. The Institute believes it is saving the future from the chaos of the surface. The Minutemen believe they are saving the Commonwealth's ordinary citizens from being crushed by forces too powerful to understand them. And the sole survivor, standing at the center of this, realizes something heavy and quiet. There is no outcome where everyone lives. There is no outcome where everyone agrees. There is no outcome where the Commonwealth becomes whole again without losing something. The war is not about avoiding destruction. It is about choosing what destruction you can live with. As the final assault draws closer, the sole survivor feels the weight of the Commonwealth pressing down. Every settlement they helped, every person they met, every ally they trusted, every enemy they made, every choice they thought was small, now revealed as part of something enormous. The wasteland has a way of doing that. It makes you believe you're only surviving day by day, until suddenly you realize you've been shaping history without meaning to. And then, at last, the moment arrives. The Commonwealth stops preparing and begins deciding. The final phase of the Fallout 4 timeline doesn't arrive like a sudden explosion. It arrives like a slow closing door, a narrowing hallway, a moment where the air feels still, but not peaceful. Because everyone in the Commonwealth can sense it now. Something is ending. Something is being decided. The factions have stopped circling each other and started committing. The sole survivor, once just a name on a Vault-Tec form, once just a parent lost in time, has become the axis the future spins around. And in the wasteland, when the future is decided, it is rarely gentle. By this point, the sole survivor has lived long enough in the Commonwealth to understand its rhythms. The way danger hides behind quiet streets, the way safety is always temporary, the way even good intentions can become weapons. But nothing prepares you for the weight of the endgame, because the endgame is not just about winning, it's about what survives after you do. The Institute remains the Commonwealth's deepest wound. It is the source of so much fear and paranoia that even people who have never seen a synth still feel the Institute's shadow in their daily lives. It is the reason communities distrust each other. It is the reason disappearances feel like a natural part of life. It is the reason the Commonwealth never truly united the way the NCR did out west. The Institute did not conquer the surface with armies. It conquered it with uncertainty, with the idea that anyone could be replaced, with the knowledge that the enemy might already be inside your walls. And now, finally, that enemy is about to be confronted directly. No matter which faction the sole survivor chooses, the timeline leads to the same kind of moment, an assault that pierces the Institute's isolation and drags the underground world into open war. This is where the Commonwealth's history changes permanently, not through rumors, not through whispered fear, through action. If the sole survivor has aligned with the Brotherhood of Steel, the final assault feels like a crusade. The Brotherhood's approach is overwhelming force, pure and simple. The Institute represents everything the Brotherhood fears: unchecked science, artificial life, and a future where machines replace humanity. The Brotherhood soldiers prepare with the confidence of an army that believes it is righteous. They don't speak of maybe. They speak of victory as if it is a law of nature. The sole survivor becomes a key part of this plan because the Brotherhood needs something it cannot build alone: access. The Institute's relay technology is the only reliable way in. Without it, the Institute remains a ghost. With it, the Institute becomes a battlefield. When the assault begins, it is loud, brutal, and final. The Institute's clean white halls fill with the sound of gunfire. Synths respond with perfect discipline, moving like programmed soldiers. Brotherhood knights stomp forward in power armor, their heavy footsteps echoing through sterile corridors. Laser fire flashes against bright walls, explosions shake the floor, and the Institute, once untouchable, becomes vulnerable in the most violent way possible. The Institute's greatest advantage, its isolation, becomes its weakness. There is nowhere to retreat, no open sky, no vast desert to escape into. When war reaches the Institute's core, it becomes a fight inside a sealed world. If the sole survivor has aligned with the Railroad, the final assault feels like a rescue mission wrapped inside a war. The railroad does not enter the Institute simply to destroy it. It enters to free synths, to break chains, to give people who were manufactured in darkness a chance to live in sunlight. And that goal makes everything more complicated, because destroying the Institute is easy compared to saving the lives inside it. Saving lives requires time, it requires planning, it requires hesitation. And hesitation is dangerous in a war zone. The railroad's endgame often involves the sole survivor guiding synths toward escape routes, activating emergency protocols, and turning the Institute's systems against itself. The Institute becomes not just a target, but a prison that must be opened before it collapses. The sole survivor becomes both a fighter and a liberator, moving through the Institute's halls while alarms scream and security systems try to close the walls in. If the sole survivor has aligned with the Minutemen, the endgame feels like the Commonwealth standing up for itself. The Minutemen are not an invading army from the skies. They are not an underground resistance group. They are the people of the Commonwealth, farmers, guards, settlers, survivors organized into a militia that exists because ordinary people got tired of being prey. When the Minutemen strike the Institute, it carries a different kind of weight. It is the surface rejecting the idea that it must be controlled by hidden scientists or dominated by outsiders. The sole survivor, as the Minutemen's general, leads this assault not with an empire's resources, but with the Commonwealth's stubborn resilience. It is not the cleanest war, it is not the most advanced, but it is human. And in Fallout, humanity's greatest weapon is often not technology, it is refusal. Refusal to die quietly, refusal to accept fear as normal, refusal to let the future be decided by someone else. And if the sole survivor has aligned with the Institute itself, then the endgame becomes something darker, because the Institute does not see itself as the villain, it sees itself as the future. It believes the surface is chaotic, doomed, beyond saving. It believes synths are tools. It believes its work is necessary. And in that worldview, resistance is not moral opposition, it is interference. So the Institute moves to eliminate threats. The Brotherhood becomes an invading force to be destroyed. The Railroad becomes a dangerous group of radicals to be erased. The Minutemen become an obstacle to be removed. And the sole survivor becomes the Institute's instrument on the surface, the one person who can walk between worlds and bring the Institute's will into the daylight. No matter which path is taken, the final phase of the Fallout 4 timeline carries a strange kind of tragedy. Because the sole survivor's story began with family, with love, with a spouse, with a child, with a home, and now it ends with war, with destruction, with decisions that cannot be undone. At the center of it all is Sean, father, the child the sole survivor lost, the old man who became the leader of the Institute. Sean's illness hangs over the endgame like a shadow. He is dying, and he knows it. His voice may remain calm, but there is a quiet finality in his words. He speaks as someone who has spent his entire life inside the Institute, shaped by its walls, shaped by its ideology. He believes in the Institute's mission. He believes it is the future. And yet, in his final days, he also seems to crave something human, something personal, something he never truly had. In the endgame, Sean may offer the sole survivor one last moment of connection, not as a director speaking to an operative, but as a son speaking to a parent he barely knows. He may ask questions. He may reflect on the past. He may speak of the choices he made and the world that shaped him. And in those moments, the sole survivor can feel the pain of what was stolen. 200 years of life, a childhood never lived together, a family erased in an instant. Fallout 4's endgame is not just about the Institute's fate, It is about the sole survivor accepting that time cannot be repaired. You can build settlements, you can destroy enemies, you can reshape the Commonwealth, but you cannot reclaim the life you lost. You cannot rewind the moment the bombs fell. You cannot return to the morning in Sanctuary Hills. All you can do is decide what happens next. As the assault progresses, the Institute begins to collapse. Systems fail, emergency lights flash, alarms echo through hallways that were once quiet. Synths scramble to defend their creators. Scientists panic, some still clinging to the belief that they are above the chaos, others realizing too late that the surface world has finally reached them. The Institute's clean perfection begins to crack, and beneath it is the truth. It was always a fragile world, not because it lacked technology, but because it was built on isolation, on separation, on the belief that you can survive by cutting yourself off from everyone else. And in the final moments, the sole survivor faces the most decisive act of all, the destruction of the Institute's reactor. The reactor is the Institute's heart. It is the power source that keeps the underground world alive. And destroying it is not just a tactical move. It is symbolic. It is the end of the Institute as a force that can shape the Commonwealth. It is the end of synth production, the end of underground control, the end of the shadow that has haunted the surface for generations. When the reactor is set to overload, the Institute becomes a place of final choices. Some people can be saved, some cannot. Some synths can escape, some will die, some scientists may be left behind, some may be rescued. And the sole survivor's actions in those final moments determine not just the outcome of the war, but the kind of person they become in the history that follows. As the sole survivor escapes, the Institute collapses behind them, and then, above the Commonwealth, the ground erupts in a flash of light. A massive explosion blooms upward like a second sunrise over Boston. For a moment, it looks almost like the Great War again. Not as vast, not as world-ending, but similar enough to make the Commonwealth's people freeze and stare because they have lived under the Institute's shadow for so long that seeing it end feels unreal. It's like watching a ghost finally vanish. And in the silence after the explosion, the Commonwealth becomes something new, not peaceful, not perfect, but changed. If the Brotherhood survives as the victor, the Commonwealth enters an era of militarized control. The Brotherhood claims the region as part of its mission. It hunts remaining threats. It confiscates technology. It enforces its ideology. Some people may feel safer under Brotherhood patrols. Others may feel oppressed. Synths, in particular, face extermination because the Brotherhood does not believe they deserve to exist. The Institute's destruction becomes a victory, but also a warning. The future will be controlled by steel and certainty. If the railroad survives as the victor, the Commonwealth enters an era of uncertainty mixed with liberation. The Institute is gone, and synths are freed from its control. But the world's fear does not vanish overnight. People still distrust synths. Communities still carry paranoia. The railroad may not have the power to rule the Commonwealth, but it has changed it. It has forced the world to confront a new kind of personhood. And even if the Commonwealth remains chaotic, the idea of freedom expands. If the Minutemen survive as the victor, the Commonwealth enters an era of rebuilding. The Institute's shadow is gone, and settlements can begin trusting each other again, slowly, carefully. The Minutemen don't rule with an iron fist. They protect. They respond. They create a network of communities that support each other. The Commonwealth becomes a patchwork of cooperation, fragile but hopeful. It is not an empire. It is not a machine. It is a human attempt at a future. And if the Institute survives as the victor, the Commonwealth enters an era of hidden control. The surface continues living its rough, violent life, but now the Institute's power remains unchallenged. Synths continue being produced. The Institute continues shaping the world from beneath, and the future becomes something engineered, something designed, something that may look stable, but is built on control and secrecy. No matter which ending becomes real, Fallout 4's timeline ends with the same haunting truth. The Commonwealth survives, but it does not heal completely. The scars remain, the ruins remain, the wasteland remains, because in Fallout, the apocalypse is not an event you escape, it is a world you live inside. And for the sole survivor, the endgame brings a final, quiet moment. Not always peaceful, but quieter than the battles. A moment to stand in the Commonwealth and look at what remains. To think about Sanctuary Hills, now a settlement of scrap and stubborn hope. To think about the spouse lost in Vault 111. To think about Sean, the child who became a stranger, the son who became father, the family that was never truly returned. The sole survivor began their journey frozen in time, ripped from the old world. They ended it shaping the new world, whether they wanted that responsibility or not. They became a legend in a land of ruins. A person whose choices changed history. And in the quiet, after the Institute's fall or its survival, the Commonwealth stretches out into the future, uncertain and endless. Raiders will still raid, mutants will still roam, people will still fight. People will still build, the world will still be harsh, but the shadow beneath it has shifted, and that alone changes everything. After the Institute's fate is sealed, the Commonwealth doesn't suddenly become peaceful, it doesn't become clean, it doesn't become whole again. Fallout has never been that kind of story. The wasteland doesn't reward you with perfection, it rewards you with continuation, with the simple fact that the world is still there when you wake up, still waiting, still dangerous, still full of broken roads and stubborn people trying to live on them. And yet, even without peace, the end of Fallout 4's timeline still carries a strange kind of quiet. Because for the first time since the sole survivor stepped out of Vault 111, the Commonwealth's future is no longer completely unknown. It is still uncertain, yes. It is still fragile, yes. But the largest shadow that haunted the region, whether destroyed or empowered, has been confronted. The Institute is no longer just a rumor. It is no longer just a whisper in the dark. It is a fact with consequences, and those consequences ripple outward like waves across the ruined streets of Boston. So in this final part of the Fallout 4 timeline, the story becomes less about war and more about what happens after war, what survives, what changes, what people believe when the fighting stops long enough for them to think. For the sole survivor, this stage of the timeline is deeply personal, because the journey that began with the end of the world and the theft of their family has finally reached its conclusion. They have found Sean. They have spoken to him. They have seen what he became, and whether they chose to stand with him, against him, or somewhere in between, the truth remains the same. The life they lost can never be returned. Sanctuary Hills will never be what it was. Their spouse will never come back. Sean will never be the child they held in their arms. 200 years will always sit between the sole survivor and the world they remember, like a wall made of time itself. The sole survivor's victory, whatever form it takes, does not restore the past. It only determines what the future will look like. And the Commonwealth, in the aftermath, becomes a place where the future begins to take shape around the faction that remains standing. If the Brotherhood of Steel holds power after the endgame, the Commonwealth becomes something like an occupied territory. Brotherhood patrols move across the region with discipline and authority. Vertibirds cut across the sky. Power-armored soldiers stand like statues of the old world's military might, claiming ruins and outposts as if they are replanting flags into broken soil. To some people, this feels like safety. Raiders think twice before attacking a settlement that sits near Brotherhood patrol routes. Super mutants are hunted aggressively. Dangerous creatures are cleared out in a way that ordinary settlers could never manage on their own. There is a certain kind of stability that comes from living under the shadow of a powerful army, but stability has a cost. The Brotherhood does not ask the Commonwealth what it wants. It decides. It confiscates technology. It controls resources. It enforces its ideology, and its ideology is rigid. Ghouls are treated with suspicion or outright hostility. Advanced technology is seized, regardless of who needs it, and synths, no matter how peaceful, no matter how human they seem, are seen as enemies by definition. In a Brotherhood-controlled commonwealth, the Institute's destruction is framed as a victory for humanity, a cleansing, a necessary purge, and the Brotherhood's future becomes a future where the definition of human is narrow and the price of safety is obedience. If the Railroad survives and succeeds, the Commonwealth becomes a different kind of place. The Institute's grip on synth life is broken. Synths are freed from their creators, no longer born into slavery beneath the earth. For the Railroad, this is the moment they lived for, the moment their entire mission was built around. But liberation does not instantly erase fear. The Commonwealth has been poisoned by paranoia for too long. People still whisper about synth infiltration. People still look at strangers with suspicion. Some communities will accept synths, others will reject them. Some will hunt them. It is the beginning of a long, uncertain future where the Commonwealth must redefine what a person is. And the Railroad itself faces a strange problem after success. It was built to fight a hidden enemy. It was built to rescue and escape and survive. But after the Institute is gone, the Railroad must decide what it becomes. Does it dissolve? Does it remain as a protector of synth rights? Does it become a political force? Or does it fade back into the shadows, its mission complete, leaving behind only stories? In a railroad-shaped commonwealth, the future is not defined by order. It is defined by possibility. The idea that freedom can exist even in ruins. The idea that personhood can expand beyond biology. The idea that the wasteland can become kinder, not because it becomes less violent, but because people choose to see each other differently. If the Minutemen rise as the Commonwealth's strongest force, the aftermath feels like a slow rebuilding rather than a sudden transformation. The Minutemen are not conquerors. They do not occupy the Commonwealth like the Brotherhood might. They do not operate like a secret network like the Railroad. They are a militia, a community defense force. Their strength comes from settlements working together, from farmers and guards and scavengers choosing to support one another instead of standing alone. In a Minutemen future, the Commonwealth becomes a patchwork of communities tied together by supply lines, shared defense, and mutual reliance. It is fragile. It can be broken by betrayal, by fear, by a bad leader. But it is also resilient because it is built from ordinary people rather than from a single central authority. The Minutemen's greatest strength is that they make the Commonwealth feel like it belongs to the people who live there, not to an invading army, not to a hidden underground society, not to a small resistance group, to everyone. And that sense of ownership is important because the Commonwealth has spent generations being controlled by forces beyond its understanding. In a Minutemen future, the Institute's fall becomes a story told around campfires and settlement walls, a story of the day the shadow beneath the earth finally ended, a story of the time the Commonwealth fought for itself. And if the Institute survives and maintains control, the aftermath becomes something colder and quieter. On the surface, life continues, much as it always has, Raiders still exist, settlements still struggle, Diamond City still trades. The world remains harsh, but beneath it all, the Institute's influence continues, unseen and unstoppable. In an Institute future, the Commonwealth becomes a world where the surface is still a laboratory. The Institute may speak of progress, of rebuilding, of preserving knowledge. It may genuinely believe it is saving humanity, but its methods remain rooted in control, in secrecy, in manipulation, in treating the surface as expendable. Synths continue being produced. Coursers continue hunting. The Institute continues shaping the Commonwealth from below, not through open war, but through quiet correction. And the sole survivor, if they become the Institute's leader, carries the burden of deciding whether the Institute remains what it has always been, or whether it becomes something different. Because that is one of Fallout 4's most haunting possibilities. The sole survivor, the last person from the old world, becomes the leader of the most advanced society in the new world. A person who remembers pre-war humanity, now holding the power to shape post-war humanity. It is a strange loop of history, like time folding back on itself. The sole survivor becomes both survivor and architect. No matter which ending becomes real, the Commonwealth continues moving forward. But it moves forward with new scars and new legends. And for the sole survivor, the epilogue of Fallout 4 is not just about factions. It is about settling into a world they never chose. There is a loneliness to the sole survivor's story that never fully disappears. Even surrounded by allies, even surrounded by settlements, even surrounded by people who call them general or paladin or agent or director, the sole survivor remains something rare, a person displaced in time. Everyone else in the Commonwealth grew up in this world. They learned its rules from childhood. They learned to fear radiation and raiders and mutants the way you learn to fear fire or deep water. But the sole survivor remembers grocery stores. They remember television commercials. They remember a life where the biggest worry might have been bills or schedules or traffic. That memory makes the Commonwealth feel even more alien, because it isn't just a harsh world. It is a world that replaced everything they knew. And yet, the sole survivor adapts. Because humans adapt, that is what survival is. It is not strength alone. It is the ability to become something new when the world demands it. Sanctuary becomes a symbol of that adaptation. The sole survivor's old neighborhood, once a perfect pre-war suburb, can become a settlement built from scrap and determination. The ruined houses become shelters again. The broken streets become paths again. Crops grow where lawns once were. Turrets stand where mailboxes once stood. People sleep in beds made from scavenged wood and rusted metal, and they call it home. There is something strangely poetic about that. The old world's dream of comfort collapses, and in its ruins, a new kind of comfort is built not from luxury, but from survival, from community, from the simple act of staying alive together. Diamond City continues as well, still loud and crowded, still full of arguments and trade and human drama, but without the Institute's constant shadow. If the Institute is gone, the city's paranoia can begin to soften. It doesn't vanish. People don't forget fear easily, but fear loses its sharpest edge when the source of that fear is no longer untouchable. In time, people begin telling stories differently. Instead of whispering about the Institute like an unstoppable monster, they speak of it like a defeated enemy. Instead of assuming every stranger might be a synth, they begin looking for proof before accusing. Trust doesn't return quickly, but it returns slowly, like sunlight creeping back into a room after a long storm. In the Commonwealth's smaller settlements, places like Abernathy Farm, Ten Pines Bluff, Grey Garden, and countless others become the true heartbeat of the region. These are not grand cities. They are not nations. They are clusters of people surviving on the edge of ruin. And in Fallout 4's timeline, they matter because they represent the only kind of future that truly lasts. Not a single empire, not a single ideology, but people planting seeds, repairing walls, sharing food, defending each other, and refusing to disappear. In the quiet years after the endgame, the Commonwealth remains dangerous, but it also becomes more alive. Traders travel more freely, settlements grow, people build. Children are born who never knew the Institute as a living threat, only as a story, and that is one of the most important signs of change in any Fallout timeline. When the next generation grows up with different fears than the last generation, history has shifted. The sole survivor's personal story settles into legend. Some people speak of them like a myth. The vault dweller who came from the past, the warrior who walked into the Institute and came back, the leader who united settlements, the soldier who fought alongside the Brotherhood, the shadow agent who freed synths, the director who ruled the underground world. The truth of who they were becomes blurred over time, because history in the wasteland is always shaped by rumor. People don't have textbooks. They have campfire stories. They have scattered records. They have memories. And memories become myths faster than anyone realizes. But the sole survivor knows the truth. They know what they lost. They know what they chose. And in the quiet moments, when the Commonwealth's wind moves through broken trees, when the sun sets behind ruined skyscrapers, when the sound of distant gunfire fades for a while, they may find themselves thinking about that morning in 2077, the smell of clean air, the warmth of a home, the weight of Sean in their arms, the sound of a spouse's voice, the feeling of believing tomorrow was guaranteed. And then they return to the present, to the wasteland, to the Commonwealth they helped shape, because this is where they live now, not in the past, not in the world that died, but in the world that survived. And that is the final truth of Fallout 4's timeline. The apocalypse didn't end humanity. It changed it. It forced it to become something new. And in the ruins of Boston, people continue walking forward, building lives out of scrap, telling stories in the dark, and reaching for a future that will never be perfect, but will still be theirs.